Welcome to the Rural Road Safety Awareness Week, Part 2 webinar. We're just going to let everyone join us in the room and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome to the National Center for Rural Road Safety's second webinar for this week for Rural Road Safety Awareness Week 2026, the Rural Modes Part 2. My name is Jamie Sullivan and I'm the Director of the National Center for Rural Road Safety. We'd also like to thank our co-sponsors, the NLTAPA Safety Working Group. So I want to say happy Rural Road Safety Awareness Week again to everyone. I hope you've been following along this week with us through our journey through the rural modes, where we went through roadway regulars on Monday, micro movers on Tuesday, big movers on Thursday, route runners on big movers on Wednesday, route runners on Thursday, and finally today we've come to the uncommon cruisers. A few webinar logistics for you all. Today's webinar will be 2 hours in length. To activate our closed captioning for the webinar, you can click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen, and you can also use that same button to adjust any captions that you need to. We will have a recording of today's webinar on our website for archival. The QR code on the right-hand side will take you right to where that is. You can also find it under our training dropdown on our website at ruralsafetycenter.org. Today, if you have any questions for our trainers, we'd please ask you to put those in our Q&A pod. You can also use the Q&A pod to alert the organizers of technical difficulties. That will just help us find them a lot easier. You'll notice our chat pod will be used for dropping in some links for you all to introduce yourself and ask and provide any resources you may want to share with each other. We will also have our handouts available for download. Those will be put periodically into the chat pod for you all. Those will include all of the slides for today, including these beginning ones that we're going through that have some QR codes for you. Please complete our feedback form at the end of the webinar. We'd love to hear from you what other topics you'd like to hear about for the rest of this year. And then certificates of completion and the application for more formal CEUs, if you need those, will be provided in about 6 to 8 weeks. We do have just a few announcements for you. We have a few new Home Safely podcast episodes. Episode 10 includes Jay Otto, and this conversation talks about the role of human behavior in rural traffic safety and how organizations can promote a road safety culture that saves lives. Episode 11 is Jeff Pulver and discusses rural main roadways and also the state's systemic approach to meeting the safety needs of multiple modes. And then hot off the press, so hot off the press, it's not even up on our website yet, but will be by the end of today, will be episode 12, which will feature Nathan Bells from Alaska, who will be talking about many of the different modes in Alaska and their unique challenges. So we'd love to hear you tune in or have you tune in for episode 12 as well. This QR code will bring you there as soon as that is up on our website later today, and you should see some social media posts going out about that as well. We have 4 presenters today to talk about various different modes, and I'm really excited to turn our presentations over to them now. Robin Phillips will be our first presenter. She joined the National Rural Transit Assistance Program in December 2014 and now has more than 29 years of experience working with Federal Transit Administration programs at the state and national level, including at Oregon and Washington State Departments of Transportation as Regional Transit Coordinator and Administrator of Coordinated Transportation, respectively. In the private sector, she was Senior Policy Director at the American Bus Association. Throughout her career, she has been involved in the planning and development of local, regional, and state multimodal transportation networks to respond to community needs. Her education and experience as a lawyer have proved valuable for interpreting federal regulations and policies. Robin has specific interests in inner-city transportation, rural and tribal transit research, and visible and usable data, such as the GTFS data used for online trip planners to improve passenger information, planning, and transportation coordinating. Working at National RTAP is a natural culmination of Robin's experience and her dedication to improving transportation options in rural and tribal communities. And we're excited that she's going to speak today on working with rural transit partners and accessing data sets to map transit locations for safety improvement and analysis. So I'm excited to hand this over now to Robin.
Thanks so much, Jamie. I'm excited to be here and to get the conversation started about transit and the role that having data to share. I feel like data is the Esperanto of the work we do. It's hard for people to understand how many, how much, how often without that data. And really, in the last couple of years, as we've been implementing the GIS layer for transit and fixed route transit, as well as capturing areas where demand response transit is available, it helps people visualize and understand how much, how often, and where they can look for it. And I'm excited today to share some of the perspective of rural transit. As you mentioned, I work at National RTAP. Yesterday was a National Rural Transit Day. So I'm wearing my t-shirt in honor of that. It's not quite business casual, but it's got the theme of the day on it. And I have, I want to go through several things, just a little bit about our organization. Really, one of the things about the work we do is you don't do it alone. If you conceptualize the National Transit Network as a network, it's about how we connect. And that means with partnerships, working together, and that recognition that no trip is a monomodal trip unless you're talking about walking somewhere, because you start out walking and you end up walking. But if you're on a vehicle of any type, you're walking to the vehicle. If you're using a transit vehicle, you're probably walking or rolling to that vehicle. You may be walking or riding a bike for part of that trip. Bikes on buses are really, really common. And when I worked in Oregon, we made sure that both the rural intercity and the local transit had bike racks, because it often completes a trip, or maybe it's part of a trip to have bike rides. So I'm real excited to talk about how do we build our partnerships, and then how are we visible? Because if you can't see something, it doesn't exist. But once you do see it, you see it everywhere. So I am hopeful that we can bring the GIS layers for transit into the discussion for roadway maintenance, roadway safety, and as part of the multimodal discussion. And also, our resources are available for everyone. National RTEP develops and shares training. We help small transits do compliance training. All of our resources are free. If you're looking for a way to contact the local transit near you, you can contact us if you're not able to find them. The role of transit in rural communities is fairly fundamental for economic development and basic access to necessities of food and healthcare. One of the things that I do when I look at transit in rural areas as well as urban areas, you have people that are supplying, you have organizations that supply transit, and you have organizations that use it and are market segments. And when we're talking about modal, you have walking, biking, transit, and cars on the road. But you may also have social service agencies and public health, other tourism, other organizations that are employment where there demand. These are consistent demand for access in rural areas as well as urban areas. And your local government, your planning, your board meetings, these are all, Rotary Chamber, these are all opportunities to share information about what's going on with transportation in your area, and also get feedback from people who are users or dependent on the transportation, as everyone is dependent on some form to make their lives work. It's just the modal access and ability to uh, maintain independence, age in place, get your first job. All of those things are part of the multimodal network in rural areas. I worked with USDA to do the transportation part of this Rural Community Action Guide. And it's a great place to start if you're looking at improving the transportation in your community. In the last couple years, really very exciting, FTA started requiring that the grantees for 5311, the non-formalized rural program for communities under 50,000 and tribes, provide information in their annual reporting about where they serve. This is a picture, a partial picture of the Service Explorer, and I have the link at the bottom that shows, it names the places. So part of what people are reporting is the places where they serve and provide transportation. And it's huge. Literally, most of the dots you see there are invisible on the ground. These are demand response services that don't have bus stops necessarily. They pick up at the grocery store, they pick up at the health clinic, and maybe those places have a bus stop sign to help people get on and off the vehicle, but they don't have schedules, they don't have routes, and sometimes are seen or not seen in the communities that they serve. So if you're looking to find transit, I think one of the things that came up at the Rural Road Safety Summit that I went to, uh, we talked about how there's higher levels of pedestrian traffic, pedestrians on or near streets, issues around vehicle and pedestrian interaction, where you have transit, particularly fixed route, but that's also true with demand response, where you have vehicles stopping and using lifts for people to roll aboard from sidewalks if there's sidewalks. So this data is really useful in understanding whether or not you have more people near or on the roadway as part of the transportation program. So that's demand response. This is fixed route. And I don't think you can see really well, but in each of these vehicles, there's a number that says the number of stops that is part of that. This gives you a general sense about where you're seeing the GIS layer for fixed routes. So you can go down to the stop level. BTS, Bureau of Transportation Statistics, has the GIS layer with the National Transit Map. Also, there is an intercity bus map that gives you basic information about where intercity buses are. And in rural areas, that may be on the state highway and it may just be a sign. I ran the intercity bus program in Oregon and managed it in Washington State. And we were really happy to have stop locations that weren't just a sign on the side of the road, but that can be part of it. And so understanding where those are, seeing what opportunities are available for improving the safety around those, and the safety around having vehicle and pedestrian movement on the roadway. So this is the location for this map viewer with from BTS. It's an ArcGIS GIS layer. The other thing is that we tend to see the part of the road that we work with as what's happening on the road, but there are many users that use it in many ways, and sometimes when we're not looking. Economic development, tourism, education, and employment all have an interest in and a demand for access to the road, to the transportation vehicles. Uh, in some states, Oregon has a scenic bikeways system, like the scenic roadways, and it is an opportunity to invite people to use the uh, enhancement and infrastructure that Oregon has invested in since I think probably early 70s. The bike bill required that all roadways that were being improved add road shoulder for bikeways. So it isn't everywhere because not every rural road has been improved, and but there is after 50 years of improvement and roadway management, there's a lot of space on Oregon roads for bikes to travel. And so they've taken advantage of that with economic development. Emergency services, public works, public safety, these are all people that also are interested in this information. Uh, your local transit works with your mobility challenged residents. They've got the addresses, they know what their needs are, they know where they live, and they have vehicles that can help move people when there's an emergency. They can also move emergency workers during an emergency. I know that transit has been involved with helping fight wildfires in the West and providing access to areas for those emergency workers. So I think that we want to remember that there's a lot of stakeholders and they don't just want things from us, but they can give things to us as well. Another part of the public safety and engagement with transit is working on disrupting human trafficking. I know that many states have stepped up and had statewide programs. Transit is sometimes a place where people take advantage of it's the isolation where the vehicles are moving, the time on the road. Uh, Transit doesn't go through and do background checks on all their riders. People get on the buses and they get off the buses. If they don't cause trouble, they're not, people are not asking, why are you going here? What are you doing here? That isn't part of a transit program. But if you have the capacity to build awareness in your maintenance team, your safety crew, make human trafficking training available to people and also have build the partnerships with law enforcement so that when your staff see things, they can contract law enforcement to do interventions for people. And that is something that is super, super important around human trafficking, especially in rural areas. We always think we're so safe, it's so quiet, but it also is a place because of that where you can have significant negative things happen as well. And your transit agency, your local transit agency, can be a partner with you in promoting your safety messages and reaching parts and segments of the community you may not have otherwise connected with. So, these are things that I brought up earlier. The other part of this is many of these rural services are out early in the morning, and some, if they're traveling, 150 miles one way for a doctor's appointment for someone, and then they're coming back, they're on the road at different hours. And if they are part of the emergency preparedness in your program, they can be assistants. And I think it's important for people to see each other as just more probe, more eyes, more opportunity to implement your safety program and to provide more safety on the roadway for people who have roadway departure, accidents, end up being invisible because they go off the road at a time when no one sees them in a place where no one sees them, that maybe the bus driver will see them in the morning and be able to call that in, which has happened. Another thing is that often the roadway was not built in reference to pedestrian needs, and that seems pretty straightforward. However, oftentimes it is the only way for people to get across a creek or Other obstruction is to be on the roadway, and this has created some real safety issues. In this Pine Line shuttle is an example where our program worked with the community in Mitchell County to start a transit system to help people cross a bridge that didn't have any pedestrian or very slim to none, no pedestrian space, but it was the only way to get across. And they had people crossing it all the time, and it provided a significant hazard. So they built a transit system, which they needed anyway, that circulated in the town, but also went to some of the farther out communities to bring people in and keep them from being on a fairly dangerous bridge. Uh, I think that sometimes people think, oh, these rural transit people, they just run these little buses around, these little vans around. It's like a van pool, but actually they have all the responsibilities of a larger transit. They have drug and alcohol programs, they have driver training, they have to comply with all the rules that Federal Transit Administration requires for larger transits, and they do a lot of reporting, and so they are. Um, very much part of the transportation system, and they have very highly trained people. They have dispatchers. These are all assets that can be used for building your safety framework and network in a rural area. And they are very, very committed to their communities and the safety of people and the ability of people to live safely in their communities. Uh, so this is an example of a public transit involvement with a safety campaign in Oregon, where they were looking at transitioning drivers to or drivers to transit when their capacity to drive was reduced. Also, they're working with getting veterans to medical appointments and helping them access adequate transit to stay in their communities. So I think that I'm encouraging here is that if you haven't thought about transit as a potential partner for implementing and amplifying your safety messages or supporting your program, I think it's an opportunity for you to reach out and connect with the transit in your area and have someone else in the community supporting the work you're doing and they have multiple connections outside transportation, and they are the front line with the community in many ways and in many aspects that are not generally engaged with the transportation system or transportation planning. So just as a sort of a heads up, thinking about any kind of projects that the roadway is initiating, it's good to give the transit people a heads up too, because they're getting people to doctor's appointments. And if they don't know this is happening, they can end up being, having major issues with people and having the issues around people who have chronic illnesses and people who are getting to work. All of these things, if the transit agency has a heads up, they can schedule it so that it doesn't affect people's ability to make their lives work or keep their job or stay healthy, particularly with people who are having dialysis. It's an important thing for them to be able to access that. One of the things that I think about is I said, oh, well, we have a transportation network. Well, what that means is that like a watershed, we travel a lot within small area. We travel fairly often within regional areas, and then we have occasional national travel demands. But what does that look like when you add that up? Where are the hospitals in the areas? Where are the shopping? Where is the employment or major residential locations? These are these are like hotspots in a travel shed, and it helps to think about how people are moving regionally, which is an recently high requirement. I don't know how many of you know this, but I think the rural community clinics have been really harmed in the last couple of years. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been taken out of rural health. And so what that means is for people to access adequate medical care, doctors, and often basic pregnancy and childbirthing, they have to travel huge distances. And that means if they are not they do not have a vehicle, or they only have one vehicle in their family, they're looking for more ways to travel regionally. And so the regional needs have increased the size of the travel shed, but also the interdependence of transit networks in helping people access what they need. If you have any questions, or you're trying to connect with transportation information or the transit people in your state or regional area, give us a call. We'll help you find it, and we'll help connect you with the people who can support your program. And this is me, and this is our organization. And we really look forward to working with you to have a safer roadway and safer travel for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for sharing all the great resources that you guys have, and about yesterday's Rural Transit Day. So that happens every July on the same day, I believe, as well, correct? So every July 16th? Perfect. So
Yes.
if you weren't able to join them this year, please make sure you put that in your calendar for next year to join them. They host a few different chats on Zoom and talk about rural transit. So thank you so much. At this time, we do not have any questions for Robin. We did have some participants drop in some resources, so I did put those in the chat pod. After I introduce our next speaker, I am going to post a few links to webinars on transit and human trafficking that we have archived from the center as well, in case you're looking to learn a little bit more about those topics that Robin was talking about. So our next speaker is going to be Jay Grossman, who is currently a professor of civil engineering at Valparaiso University, focusing on transportation, safety, and operations. He has previous experience in consulting and served as county engineer for a county with a large Amish population. And today he's going to talk to us about improving safety for all modes by adding buggy lanes on roads that also serve bicycle traffic. So Jay?
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate being given this chance to talk about road safety, and especially with buggies and vulnerable road users. This is a work we've been working at kind of, I guess, last 5 years in partnership with Elkhart County in Indiana. And I'll go into more of that in a second here about that. I guess we're focusing, I guess, on different users of roads, or the non-traditional users of roads, and I think buggies fits into that well. The Amish buggies, horse and buggies, or horse-drawn vehicles, a lot of different terms we use for that. So I want to give a couple of shout outs before we get started. One, I work pretty closely with Charlie McKenzie at Elkhart County Highway, and he's worked on a lot of this and got me a lot of the data and put together some of these slides about the maintenance process and some of the projects they work on there. So it is fairly up to date on that. And then also the Indiana LTAP, some of this work had been part of some projects we've done with Indiana LTAP. So I want to give them some kudos as well for helping us work on that. With no further ado, I will move on. Then like to start off with, we've done some of these presentations before, and sometimes people were caught a little bit off guard by buggies and like, what's the point of that? And isn't that such a small percentage of users? But in the counties that have Amish populations, this is a big deal. This is a big issue for us in some of these, in our more rural counties. As we go through, and I guess when I say I used to also be the county engineer at Elkhart County, so started when I was there and now at the university, right, from that. So this is what I want to talk about today. Why are we focusing on this? Why have we done multiple projects now looking at buggies and vulnerable road users in Elkhart County particularly for that, and then working through community engagement, maintenance and safety, and so forth, and some of the issues we're having keeping the data going and proceeding with more projects as we go forward. for that. So the part of the why is I used to think, well, Elkhart County, Marshall County, a couple of the counties here in Indiana. Um, uh, they've got known Amish populations. Ohio's famous for it. Pennsylvania's famous for it. But is it much outside of that? And we found some of these charts and some of these maps and realized that, yeah, they're actually, it is more widespread than I even imagined, even coming from a county with a large Amish population for that. And it's growing. The Amish population has doubled in the last 20 years. And so I see more and more pictures and so forth from other states, which I didn't realize had an Amish population, and it turns out that they do, and growing for that. And we got some more tables in here. We've pulled out of some different resources. You can see the links at the bottom there for that, just showing what the size of this is. And I think the one thing I wanted to point out on here is, all the different states that are involved in some of these, I guess, the more traditional states that are known to have Amish settlements in that. And then roughly the size of the Amish population in that. The numbers I don't think are super accurate. I would say this is plus or minus probably 10%, just because it's kind of hard to track these things. They don't have really good record keeping in that. For that, within Indiana, these are the spread of the counties. I'm up from Elkhart County, so we're up here in the northern tier, and that's where I always thought most of the Amish in Indiana live. But there's also a large population now moving to the south. The Amish, again, community continues to grow, and they look for rural places to settle predominantly. And so they're always looking for available land and other features, and they start to grow more into these more rural areas. And so you can see here's by counties, which counties have the most Amish adherents, that's what they call it in this table for that, and so forth. And Elkhart County is not on this list for that, but we are on some of the next ones. All right, through that. This is within Indiana. Some of this data is a little bit older. Right through there. Again, the idea is it's not just a few counties across the country. It is more widespread than I thought. A little bit about Elkhart County. What we are known for is having lots of Amish, and so people will come to Elkhart County as part of tourism, and the neighboring county, LaGrange, and do Amish things, I guess. There's lots of flea markets and auctions and things. Just driving around looking at the Amish community, I guess, I've seen tour buses going down some of our smallest county roads, apparently just looking at Amish houses as they go by. The other thing we're known for is being the RV capital of the world. We make the most, I think something like 80 or 90% of the RVs manufactured in the world are in Elkhart County. So it's a large manufacturing base, which means we have a lot of industry, which is maybe unusual to have a large manufacturing base. And that being the number one employer in the county is manufacturing for that. And they do a lot of Amish work in these trailer factories and working in that. So that it's a combination of, so that gives us a combination of the Amish population, which prefer to be rural and obviously using horse and buggies and bicycles. There's a lot of bicycle traffic also for that. And having large employment, Elkhart County attracts a number of employees from all the surrounding counties that come to Elkhart County. That's a lot of road traffic and also a lot of industrial road traffic, a lot of deliveries, a lot of truck traffic, and quite a bit of that ends up on our rural county road. So it's not a good combination of high traffic and horses and buggies and bicycles out on the rural county roads. Community input is an important piece, and we want to make sure we touch on that, in that the Amish have their own safety committee. And so about 6 years ago, Charlie McKenzie, referred to at the beginning, has started attending those on behalf of the Elkhart County Highway Department and talking to them about highway things. And so bicyclists being hit and buggies being hit are obviously really important issues for the Amish community, and that's more what we focus on when we go to those meetings. All right, through that. And also maintenance. And so the maintenance of the roads through that. And that's where we're going to kind of start with through that. And Elkhart County does require buggy registration and license plates, and we use that money then to improve safety and improve roadway surfaces for predominantly for the Amish buggy. Through that, we do have an ordinance for that. Through that, it's a $100 fee annually to register your buggy. Through that, I think most of our neighboring counties all have that ordinance. I think Marshall County started about 10 years ago. They started also requiring it. registration. Some of the counties in southern Indiana also make these nice little buggy plates through that. We issue over 5,000 of these buggy plates per year and obviously for all registered buggies. They have to be updated every year. They get a new sticker to put onto it. They can go to branches of banks and pay in person, or they can mail things in and we process it at the county office. This is a breakdown of what the revenue is. We raised rates in 2022, as you can see, because we were spending so much money on fixing issues related to Amish to the buggy traffic. And I'll show that here. We call it horse troughs. I'll show that here in a second through that. And I wanted to point out that our last one on the slides from 2023, but this has continued. We've continued to raise as much revenue basically as we spend. We keep it pretty well balanced. And so we make sure we do that. Buggy plate registrations, since we started engaging the community, have gone up after COVID. I guess we regained momentum then through that, and it has continued to go on. And it's because we've been talking to the Amish Safety Council, which then goes out and they talk to their constituency about that and about where that money's going. I think that helps that piece of that. And back to what are we using that money for, and what are some of our projects? And it is kind of a combination of safety and maintenance, and because they're both hand in hand. And our biggest issue with horse buggies is that they create a wear path. Hopefully you can see my mouse here. They create a wear path usually to the right edge, right third of the road, where the hooves of the horses are running. And that's because of the horseshoes are digging out the road, I guess you might say, the pavement surface there, and they create this trough, and that holds water. And so that's a big maintenance issue. And it's also a safety issue in that vehicles will try to stay out of that trough, especially as they get deeper and hold more water. And even in dry situations, it'll catch a wheel and cars will veer back and forth. So cars try to stay out of those troughs. And so they're going to try to stay either to the center, or they're going to move further to the right and more likely to run off the edge of the road and have a crash based on that. And so it's two things. And I guess I want to point that out as we go through this. You'll see this again, is it's not just a maintenance issue, it's also a safety issue for us largely through that. And what's causing this, general horseshoes being metal did this before, but in the last 20 years, the Amish community has been adding these carbide and tungsten pieces onto it. They adhere it to the bottom of I'm not sure it's like a welding thing, but they adhere to the bottom of the horseshoe to give the horses better traction, which is a big safety issue for horse and buggies. And that just literally just eats out the road through that. And you'll see this in any Amish area. It starts immediately once the road is opened, and it's about every 4 years you need to come back and redress these surfaces to keep them level across that. And it depends on horse traffic, but roughly on a 4-year basis, you're going to have to do some chip sealing and some patching to get that filled in, right, for that. And, it's been proposed in the past, well, what if they used rubber shoes? What if they didn't put these on that? And, talking to the community, and this is where the outreach was important, is that the Amish community preferred to have good traction and pay the cost of fixing those horse troughs. And that's why the county raised the rates for the plates and put all that money back into fixing those things. That was the preference actually of the Amish Safety Committee. They'd rather have good traction on the horses in all weather. We do get a lot of snow and ice in northern Indiana, so they'd rather have good traction through all weather than to try to switch to some other type of horseshoe that won't last as long and be as durable through that. The other piece then is, well, we can do spot paving, and we can do a strip of chip seal right down the horse trough and bring it back up to the level of the surface around it. And the other option is to move all that traffic out of the, I guess, motor vehicle lane, the standard travel lane, and put it over on the edge. And so that's a process we've been working on about 15 years now. We've been looking at, I think their first one was in 2010 through that, adding in an additional lane. And so it's really, we call it a buggy lane, but it's really just a wide shoulder. It's an 8-foot wide shoulder. And so in all of our road plans, when we get federal aid contracts, we just show an 8-foot shoulder. And we all know that's going to be where the buggies are. The first time we did it, I was working here at the time, and I was like, well, should we put a diamond mark on it and label it as a buggy lane, like a kind of like a a toll lane or something like that, or our commuter lane. And like, no, we just leave it alone, and everybody knows what to do. And so we didn't need any special documentation, any special striping or markings for it or signage. It looks like a shoulder, and the Amish population are used to using shoulders on state routes where they were available, and it works really well. So it's a two-step thing, I guess, two pieces in that we're moving the maintenance issue, the wearing of the surface where the horse trough is, over onto the shoulder. And we're also then separating the buggy traffic and bicycle traffic out of the motor vehicle lane. And so one of the obviously crash issues we have is the speed differential between buggies, which are going 10 miles per hour on average, bicyclists, which may be going 10 to 15, and motor vehicle traffic, which most of our rural county roads are 55 miles per hour, is our statutory speed limit. There's some 45 in there, but it's high speed traffic. 85th percentile is usually right near that 55 to 60 mile per hour range on that. And so obviously that's, as you all know, is a huge safety issue to have that speed differential. Well, by moving the Amish buggies onto the shoulder and the bicyclists, it's really increased that safety a lot. And so that's been our preferred way to do it, or the county's preferred way to do it, is they go through there. We do have to be careful about that when you're adding in these dedicated lanes / big shoulders. In that is, you have to think about, well, at the end of this, because if you do a project that's 3 miles long, at the end of it, how do you get the Amish buggies back into the main line? They have to merge back onto the normal county road surface, which is typically 11 feet wide in the lane. We do have to think about that and how that's being used through that. Here's some pictures of that. County Road 16 was our first project. It was a federal aid, combined federal aid project with the next county over, LaGrange County, connecting two really, I guess, big hot spots in the Amish tourism area in Middlebury and Shipshewana through that. And so you can see this is about 5 years in. I think this roughly, we've already got a horse trough developing, but it's not in the motor vehicle lane. So that's an improvement for operations there. And it doesn't take long to start having that issue. So that was our first shot at it. It's our first try at that, and it worked really well. I think everyone was very happy with it. Then we continued on in 2016. We did a full reconstruction of County Road 38, and we included the 8-foot wide shoulders. I mean, mail delivery also uses it. Anybody can use that shoulder, but predominantly it's used by the Amish and the Amish buggies and bicyclists through that. And then we've continued on. We did other sections, another 5 miles or so of County Road 38, crossing the county. Here's a nice aerial view of it from our drone, showing just what it looks like. It's essentially an 8-foot shoulder through that. And this is County Road 40 was this is an interesting one. This was a rural safety project that we got HSIP money for safety, and it wasn't just because we were going to reconstruct the road, which the other ones were. This one was specifically to add these buggy lanes on it. This road had seen a fatality probably about 10 years, 15 years before this, where a car had hit a buggy. And so this was a safety project to add in that buggy lane onto it. And so it was more of a retrofit and less of a full reconstruction. The other ones had all been full reconstructions. We did want to highlight this. This is after 1 day of horse and buggy traffic. You can already see the marks from the shoes on the horses as they go through. It's already starting to chip off. The pavement takes 1 day. And so this is a fairly busy road into Wakarusa. And so I don't know, we're not sure exactly how many buggies a day that is, because that's an issue we have. I'll mention here in a second. But you can already see we're already getting a lot of wear and tear on that after a single day of traffic in there. Having these dedicated lanes added to the roads, right? The primary concern is safety on that, and that's eliminating that speed differential between the motor vehicles and the non-motorized vehicles using the road, right, through that. And these are all in corridors where and I guess anecdotally knew that there was a lot of mixed traffic in that, and essentially a lot of buggies and a lot of bicyclists using that through there. The county's invested a lot of money in this, right? Over $25 million since 2010, first started the project. These are typically all except that one project were roads that were scheduled for reconstruction anyway and had fairly high motor vehicle traffic, 10 to 15,000 vehicles a day on it. and also a significant number of buggies, obviously. And so that's, I guess there's no, I don't have an equation to say when you should really consider it, but that's the anecdotal way we looked at it, experiential data on it. We knew this was an issue in these roads. Some of them had a crash history for that, but it's just that, we could see that there was this large mix between motor vehicles and the buggies, and that's why they popped to the top. But it was also usually during a full reconstruction. Adding downside of the dedicated lanes is that it's expensive, right? There's an additional cost on that, and most of these projects also required additional right-of-way, and so that adds a big cost. Because we were going through and doing a full reconstruction, we were already looking at the ditches and the hydraulics and all of that at the same time, and so it all works well when you're doing that, to add these in. Most of our county roads, to add in the extra 8 foot of pavement isn't going to fit. We're not going to be able to get that squeezed into our 40-foot right of ways on that. And so it is a big lift. It is not cheap, but if you're going to do the project anyway, say in our experience, if I'm using federal aid, if you just call it an 8 foot shoulder, no one questions it. It's not an added travel lane, it's just a shoulder, and then it does increase the safety a lot, added benefit in there. Some of the issues we got are knowing where are our buggies and where are our bicyclists, right? And so the county's traditionally been using tube counting systems. We count every mile segment of our network, 1,000 odd miles, every 3 years. But the systems we've had don't pick up buggies. And they do give you some bicycle numbers. I'm not sure how accurate they are, but they don't do buggies. We did a project last year with Indiana LTAP looking at options for that and really using video cameras and then shipping that off to be analyzed by like JMAR and some other agent or companies can do that analysis for you. That was the best results we ever got for being able to count how many buggies you've got and other non-motorized vehicle users on the road. And that's really key for going forward and having a programmatic way of looking at these and picking where you want these projects to be through that. And then safety data has been really sparse in Indiana, on the standard Indiana accident report form that the police use. There is no buggy category. There is an animal and roadway. Occasionally they'll tick that box, but that's usually deer, right? That's not usually horse and buggy. For that, we get better data. There is a bicycle category through that. Our local MPO does a great job, MACOG. They do a great job of tracking buggy crashes for us, and we have data from them, but it's not sure. I'm sure I've got an accurate count on that. And they show it by county, but we can't break it down by jurisdiction. So just inside the Elkhart County Highway Department's jurisdiction, we're not sure how many are on those roads versus countywide, which includes the cities and towns within that area through there. Here's just an example. This is our bicycle crash data. This is being tracked by the Highway Department. So this is on highway county highways through that under their jurisdiction on the number of bicycle crashes we have. And then again, it's coming straight from the Indiana State crash report form. Please fill out. This is MACOG's portal, which shows the number of bicycle, pedestrian, and horse and buggy crashes across. You can filter by county, but again, we couldn't filter out by the cities, the towns. So most of the pedestrian crashes are in the cities. Bicycle crashes kind of a mixed, and then obviously the horse and buggies are out here in the rural areas. So we do get some of that. The county has just started working on a project we can download all the state's data forms into an Excel, and we're working right now on doing a macro that just searches the field where it says description and searching for the term buggy or horse and buggy. And so we can flag all of the crash reports that involve horse and buggies. And so hopefully in a year, we'll have better data on that. But I'd say that's one of the biggest issues we've got is programming where these are most useful based on the data of the number of horse and buggies and bicyclists using it. That'd really be helpful. And that's something we're looking at now. And that's our presentation right now. If you have any questions, my email address is on here. I'd be happy to also connect you with Charlie from Elkhart County Highway Department.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jay. We do have quite a few questions that came in for you, so I'm going to go ahead and go through a few of those. One of them is whether or not you've considered different treatments of the line of roadway to reduce degradation.
We have. We used to use a lot of steel slag. We have a lot of steel mills, obviously not very far away from us, or did. There's fewer now. And so over the years, we've tried steel slag in our chip seal, and that helps, but it's not perfect. Limestone's obviously very soft, and so using limestone aggregate's not great, but it's economical. We have a lot of that near us. Through there, I took the pictures out of the maintenance treatments they did, but we've gotten really good at doing like a 4 foot wide chip seal and just running down just through the horse trough. And that's a really economical way to keep up with the maintenance on the trough and not let it get too bad through there. The next town over in Shipshewana, on the city streets there was a concrete roadway. We don't have any concrete pavement in the county, but in the city, they had a concrete roadway, and I mean, it had 3-inch deep horse troughs dug into it, and that's a lot harder to repair, we find, than the asphalt surfaces. And then we'll also do just using the screed on a paver. We've also done a lot of spot paving if the trough gets deep enough for that, if we don't catch it early enough. But we've gotten a lot better, especially with the added income coming in from the buggy plates. We've gotten a lot better at hitting these troughs before they get too bad on it.
Similar to that question where you just went through all the alternative materials, someone is wondering if asphalt is the best surface for the horse itself versus for the road itself. Do you have any information on that piece?
Ooh, I don't, but I know anecdotally, I know the Amish are concerned about, the shock on the horse's feet. Just like, I just bought some new tennis shoes and they had these huge cushioned soles, which are great for walking. I think it's the same for horses, and asphalt is, theoretically at least, a little more forgiving. It's supposed to be a flexible pavement. Whether horses feel a big difference, I don't know offhand. I do know this project on the picture here on the left was County Road 16. On the LaGrange County side, they had really bad potholes in that, and that was a big issue for the Amish because horses can break their legs if they hit the pothole wrong. And so having a heavily potholed running surface is a major issue to them. Would concrete hold up better? Maybe. I guess if you properly design all of your pavement depths, then you shouldn't. That's the professor answer. If you properly design your depths, you shouldn't have any difference in, I guess, generally in pothole propagation. But we all know how county roads go. There's not enough money ever to go around, and so you do get that problem. So that was a big issue at that time. That was in 2010 with the Amish population there. The community was really worried about how bad the potholes had gotten, and people would avoid those roads because of the danger to their horses. I don't know if I answered that question well enough.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And then one of the other questions as well is about the signage. You did talk about not necessarily putting up any signage to denote that these larger shoulders are for horse and buggies, but do you use any other type of signage, such as in some states they put up the share the road signs that do indicate that it's for buggies and not necessarily for bicycles?
Mm. We do put up the buggy warning signs, the standard yellow diamond with the buggy warning signs on it, and sometimes bicycle signs. If it's in a transition area where people are entering a heavily, I guess, trafficked area with a lot of buggies. We don't have a lot of those because it's almost kind of assumed anywhere in the county you are, but where people are coming off the state highways and entering heavy, I guess, Amish concentration, we will use the warning signs, but no, otherwise we don't. We don't have the share the road signs, to my knowledge. Yeah, I don't know of any, unless it's been 10 years, I guess, since I've been actively at the county and just an intern now in the summers. As far as I know, at that time when I left, we didn't have any share the road signs.
We do have quite a few more questions. I'm going to ask one more and then we'll move along to the next speaker just to make sure everyone has time, and we'll come back if we have time at the very end to ask you a few of the others. But the last question that we have for you right now is, Have you heard anything or know anything about the latest on e-bikes that are using those same facilities that the bikes and buggies are using, especially younger e-bike riders who can exceed 25 miles per hour but are not licensed to drive, and how this may be impacting the horse and buggies?
I don't know how they're impacting horse and buggies, but it is a big issue everywhere you go now. I mean, here in even my little town, there's some kids whipping around pretty darn fast. Yeah, that is going to be an issue because right now, watching these buggy lanes in operation, or the approved shoulders, I guess, in operation, the Amish bicyclists traditionally go about the same speed as the buggies. It's not a huge difference. Bicyclists may be going a few miles an hour faster, and they'll eventually pass some buggies, but it's a good mix by speed, which is what you want in safety, right? You want same, and I can just hypothesizing. I can imagine it's not good if someone's going 25, like, because they're going to be trying to pass all the buggies regularly. And quite often, I mean, we're up to, I don't know, 30 odd buggies an hour in some of these. So it's pretty regular that there's a buggy there. And if these e-bike people are passing and moving out into the motor vehicle lane to pass, which you have to get around the buggy, that's going to be an issue. And I feel like that's going to become a problem. And I don't have data to back that up. My gut would agree that that's going to become a problem.
Well, thank you again for your presentation. We had a lot of comments in the chat and elsewhere saying how interesting this particular topic was, and they were fascinated by the information. So thank you for that. And again, if we have time, we'll come back at the end, circle back to those remaining questions. I did also drop in the webinar chat. We have a colleagues from the Maryland Soybean Association who have put together slow-moving vehicle educational materials that we like to point out to everyone. They have a lot of resources, handouts, as well as videos for explaining how to drive around slow-moving vehicles, and they've set it up so that those resources talk about both agricultural vehicles as well as horse and buggies. So if you haven't visited their website before, please check that out. It's a great resource for educating the public on driving around these vehicles. Our next presenter is going to be Vic Lund. Vic is the traffic engineer for St. Louis County, Minnesota. Vic's 18 years of experience include rural and urban traffic safety, intersection design, intelligent transportation systems, and transportation research. Vic was awarded the 2022 David P. Brand Safety Award from the National Association of County Engineers. Vic is the current chair of the Minnesota County Engineers Association Highway Safety Committee, serves frequently as a technical liaison for research projects funded through the Minnesota Local Road Research Board, and is a member of the University of Minnesota Center for Transportation Studies Transportation Safety and Mobility Research Council. And today we're going to have Vic talking to us a little bit about improving rail crossing safety on rural local road systems through planning and implementation of substantive projects. So I'm excited to turn this now over to Vic.
Thanks, Jamie, for that introduction, and welcome from St. Louis County. I should say smoky St. Louis County. We got some wildfires nearby up on the Canadian border, but hopefully that'll be clearing out soon. Well, St. Louis County is kind of a geographic oddity. It's the largest county east of the Mississippi River. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that rail crossing safety is a big issue for us. We have 122 at-grade rail crossings on the county road system. The county owns and maintains 3,000 miles of county roads. Half that system is paved. A lot of the number of rail crossings, you might wonder, like, why do you have so many rail crossings in your county? Well, we have a lot of iron mining. So there's a lot of trains that rail the iron ore down to Duluth, the Twin Ports, and that gets shipped out to the steel mills, including Indiana, as our previous speaker mentioned. And also there's a main artery for the CN Railroad going up to Canada, coming out of Chicago. And so there's a lot of rail crossings with that. 4,500 rail crossings in the state of Minnesota. In St. Louis County, we actually tied basically for number one in the total number of crossings in the county. We have 219 crossings total in St. Louis County. The previous slide showed we had 122 just on the county road system. But we're also tied, unfortunately, for the total number of crashes, or most crashes in the state, at those rail crossings. 209, like I said, 219 rail crossings in St. Louis County. The majority of those are on the county road system. The other secondary system that actually has the second most number of crossings on the county or in the St. Louis County would be the city street system around the city of Duluth, just because of the Twin Ports industrial area and that sort of thing. Looking at our county road crossings, you can see that a slight majority of those crossings are controlled by signals and gates. And then a slight minority are controlled by passive crossings, or those that are controlled by stop and yield signs. So I'll also mention we use the word active crossing. So for those that are controlled by gates and signals, you'll see me using the word active crossing, which means that, again, they're controlled by signals and gates, or typically it's a 2-quadrant gate system installed at a crossing. Well, I'm not sure what better yardstick you can use to measure the success of any safety effort, which is the news headlines. And unfortunately, we do have news headlines here in St. Louis County about rail crossings and the crashes that occur there occasionally. And these are two of the most recent fatalities that occurred at rail crossings in St. Louis County. Both of these were on crossings on a county road. The most recent here on the left was in 2023, and this one before that was in 2019. I'm intimately familiar with both of those crossings and what the effects from those crashes were. So let's kind of drop down from the top to the bottom here, starting at the national data. So looking at 1980 through 2020, there was an 80% reduction in crashes in that period nationally at rail crossings, which is a fantastic news story. However, if I could suggest the devil's in the details here in terms of how do we get to 0 deaths at these crossings. Big effort, fully admitted, but that's still the goal. Let's look at first the bar chart here. So you can see the bar sections where that's the number of crossings in the nation. The red line is the number of crashes. You can see there was a steady decline in the number of crossings on the national inventory down to about 2010. And then the inventory plateaued. And unfortunately, it appeared that the crossing crashes also plateaued in that same period. We see the same pattern here in Minnesota. There's, again, about 4,500 crossings in Minnesota today. Back in 1980, it was approximately 6,500. And we're seeing that same pattern mimicking here. A little bit more noise in the data because it's a smaller sample, of course, but you're seeing that reduction in crossings, then kind of this plateau effect, and then same for the crashes. So looking specifically here at St. Louis County, in the 10-year period of 2013 to 2022, we had 13 crashes at rail crossings. That's all 219 on all roads in St. Louis County. Now that's only, do the math, about 1 crash per crossing per year on average. It doesn't seem like a lot. And so then the question, and rightfully so, would be, well, Vic, why are you so concerned and why is this such a priority for St. Louis County with rail crossing safety? And the problem, and the answer comes down to the likelihood of a serious event occurring or a serious outcome from those crashes that occur. I mean, it comes down to physics. You got a train driving, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of weight moving at 40, 50, 60 miles per hour, and a passenger vehicle, it just doesn't work out. And so I did some quick math on looking at the likelihood of a severity of just a normal roadway crash compared to those at rail crossings. So all crashes in St. Louis County, all roadway crashes for that same 10-year period, 2% of those resulted in a serious crash. At those rail crossing crashes, 31% of the 13 resulted in a serious crash. So that's 16 times more likely to result in a serious crash at a rail crossing compared to a roadway crash. And so that, again, this gets back to the issue of the frequency is low, but the likelihood of severity is extremely high. So looking specifically at those crossings on the county road system, you can see that 55% of our crossings are controlled by active devices. So that would be signals and gates, 2-quadrant gate typically. But they're representing 61% of the crashes that have occurred at the cumulative number of rail crossings. For the passive crossings, those controlled by stop and yield signs represent about 46% of the crossings, but they're generating about 40% of the crashes. And so we have this problem, this overrepresentation problem, which when I first saw this information through the development of our rail crossing safety plan, it was certainly eye-opening. It got us thinking differently about rail crossing safety. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But the question might be, well, why are there crashes at rail crossings when you have signals and gates? You have an obstruction, which is the gate. You have flashing lights, you have a bell. What it comes down to, folks, is that drivers are still violating that. They're driving around the gates. They're driving through the gates occasionally. And we've even had fatalities at rail crossings with signals and gates, unfortunately. So then the question, what have we done historically? And looking back in time, there was a federal initiative back in 2010, approximately early 2000s to 2010s, to place stop and yield signs at passive crossings. So those crossings that just had a crossbuck sign, you can see on the lower left corner, which technically is a yield sign, by the way. So if you ever want to impress somebody at a party or whatever, you can ask them if a crossbuck sign, what does it mean? It's the same legal effect as a yield sign. So in a sense, we're actually having, for those crossings with yield signs, it says yield, which is kind of funny. But we place stop and yield signs at those passive crossings. We also did some diagnostics with at those rail crossings with all rail crossings, actually, with the railroad representatives and the MnDOT office. And those were fed into candidates for what could be for future projects to install signals and gates. So the question is, how does that work? We used to think of it as the gold standard, and unfortunately it's not. Drop down to that third bullet point, and this is Minnesota data. Of all the crossings in the state, 0.0087 crashes per year per crossing for those controlled by stop signs, 0.0056 for those controlled by signals and gates. Folks, there's only a 36% reduction in those crashes at those crossings controlled by signals and gates. The other issue is those that are, excuse me, let me grab a drink of water here. We only have enough funding, for about installing a signal and gate system once every 2 to 3 years. But that's shadowed by those that are antiquated. So those systems last about 30 years. And so our safety program has become more of a replacement of antiquated signals and gates than installing new signals and gates. And so if we were to just put all the funding towards installing signals and gates at those crossings that are passive, that means we'd have to wait 110 years for those crossings to be treated, which is frankly not a realistic safety strategy. So this got us pushing in the direction of what can we do differently for rail crossing safety. And this notion of rail crossing closure and grade separation kept coming back to us, kind of forefront, which is we can't just rely on signals and gates. That is not a TZD strategy. We got to think differently. We got to think seriously about rail crossing closures and grade separations. I was a part of a technical advisory committee with development of the update of the Minnesota rail safety plan back in 2015. That question was posed about, well, why aren't we doing more closures and grade separations? There was a lot of pushback to that, and the pushback, while I get and understand, is, well, we just can't do it. It's too hard. And well, I've closed 4 crossings in 15 years. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort. I get it, but we got to think about those as a strategy too. So what was the vision of our safety plan? So the plan was really thinking about changing our perspective from the roadway to the rail corridor. So if you're driving along a roadway, you come up to a crossing, you might just think, well, what should we do at this crossing alone? But you're not thinking about the entire rail corridor like a subway line. So think of a subway line, you got a bunch of stops along the subway line. And, we can see that creates a different perspective, because you might say, well, if we place signals and gates here, we put a closure here, we put a grade separation over there, and we can make those crossings work with each other in a system, compared to just simply making decisions kind of blindfolded, looking at it from the roadway perspective. The second thing we talked about was prioritizing those closures and grade separations. And then lastly, this idea of as I mentioned in that previous slide, we're not getting much funding. So we're only installing a signal and gate system about once every 2 or 3 years. And it's like, well, how can we become more competitive? And that's a great thing about a safety plan. I don't care if it's regarding just roadway safety or Amish safety or rail crossing safety, but if you have a plan, it helps you prioritize, it helps you secure funding, and it helps you place the funding where it should go, which is the most likely place to generate the most benefit, right? And so that's the idea here of using the safety plan to leverage additional signals and gates that would be just installed, whereas they likely would not have been without the plan. So the plan components, we went through this logic that said we have to prove that we can't close a crossing. And then if we prove that we couldn't close it, we had to prove that we couldn't grade separate it. And if we couldn't grade separate it or justify that from a cost standpoint, then we would say we can throw it into the bucket of signals and gates, but we can't go right to signals and gates in the safety plan or just within our program. We have to first think about closure, then think about grade separation. And if neither of those work out, then we'll allow that crossing to be prioritized for signals and gates. The second thing we looked at was for those crossings that are controlled with signals and gates, those as they're aging, becoming antiquated, we want to think about kind of a strategy of what timing the cycle for replacement of those crossings, those signals and gate systems. And then the third thing, which was kind of the powerful aspect of the safety plan, was the developing a project sheets for each of the project recommendations. So it was a high-level recommendation. So for example, if you just close a crossing and now you're diverting traffic, right? Well, what happens if there's an intersection on the bypass route that needs to be improved, if there are safety improvements that are necessary at that crossing? Well, with this project recommendations, we actually linked that intersection to the crossing closure itself. So we couldn't say we're just going to close the crossing. We have to also say what are the other holistic improvements that have to be brought onto the table in order for us to close that crossing. So that would be the project in itself as a whole, instead of just a simple closure of a crossing. We then developed this project management team. We had representatives from the railroads. We have 2 Class 1 railroads that operate through St. Louis County. CN Railroad I mentioned, BNSF Railroad is the other. And then we had representatives from MnDOT, both the district and the Rail Safety Office, and then myself and a few others from the county. We had 2 workshops with that PMT. The first was a kickoff exercise with some voting exercises where we helped try to understand or tease out what those priorities should be for closures and grade separations. And then the second workshop was about those project sheets that we were talking about. So the things that we thought about for prioritization: risk, mobility, physical condition. Risk meaning what is the likelihood of a crash at a crossing. Mobility is, what's your ADT on the highway? How many trains are there? In St. Louis County, I regularly hear this phrase, I got trained, meaning that I came up to a crossing and there was a nice long freight train that I had to wait 5 or 7, 8 minutes for that to pass. And then the physical condition would be those crossings with signals and gates. Are those systems antiquated? Do they need to be replaced? When do they need to be replaced? And this was kind of like the beginning of taking this information to feed it into the priority. Then we did this pairwise comparison between variables. And so, for example, we asked our PMT members to answer these questions. So in this example, the question was, which factor is more important when identifying closures? And so there's 4 scenarios here. Scenario 1 would be which is more important if you're going to prioritize a closure: low highway volumes or high train speeds. Look at the bottom one, low highway volumes or a low max detour. That meaning the detour length of to get back to the road that you were on if you had that rail crossing closed. And from the results from that, we actually were able to kind of understand what are those factors that are most important to making decisions and prioritizing those crossings for either closure or grade separation. And so, for example, closures, you can see that low max detour, block crossings, and the number of crashes in the previous 10 years. Those were the most important factors for those. And then for grade separation, it was exposure index, which is the multiplication of the number of trains times the highway ADT. So that's called the exposure index, or highway volumes. And then if the crossings were blocked. So then we developed this computation where we used the weighted factors to multiply together to come up with a composite score. So for the closure score, you can see the most weight was given to max detour. So that is what's the length of the detour around the closure. The shorter the detour, the higher the value. The longer the detour, the lower the value, which means you have a lower score. And then we had to make some adjustments with this one, particularly because there were some results that didn't seem to be lining up with what we were expecting. But then we were able to compute what the closure score was for each of those crossings, and we could prioritize based upon highest to lowest closure score. We did the same thing for rail crossing and grade separations, and you can see the spreadsheet there ranking those. Then before we finalized this plan and put it into action, we said we need some engagement. We need some communication with the local folks. So we organized what we called the Township Workshop. This was those townships where there was a recommended closure or grade separation. Okay, so it's the most local unit of government. It's closest to the people. And so the first thing I told them was, this is not a mandate. This is not FRA telling us what to do. This is not the railroad saying, do something different. This is a true blue, homegrown safety plan. And I told him, you're looking at the guy who, if you're going to blame anybody, blame me, because it was my idea to put this plan into action. The second thing we did was we brought those project sheets, placed them in front of all the township folks, and we said, we want your comments. And I told them, tonight, I'm giving you the golden pen, and whatever you write on these project sheets, we're putting verbatim into the final plan. You're welcome to write, it's stupid. I'm okay with that. But you're also welcome to provide some constructive feedback. And it changed the mood when they understood they actually had the golden pen. And it actually generated a lot more constructive feedback. And it was actually a really good result, really good experience working with the township reps. Side note tip, I should say, on the bottom. If you're looking at a rail crossing closure, think about common property ownerships across the crossing or the track, okay? So if you have a farmer, for example, that has a hay field on the other side, or a field or whatever, that might be a problem if you're going to close that. So you have to think about some way to address that issue. So here's an example project sheet that we developed. You can see the aerial imagery, you can see the crossing, you can see the detour. If we were to close that crossing, we have comments on the lower left corner that was generated by our PMT with some specific recommendations and notes. And then you can also, if you can read it, it's kind of fine print there, kind of right down there. That's the Township Workshop comments, so we included those. And then we have the ADT, well, just general data, I suppose, for each of those crossings. And so we created a project sheet just like this for all the crossings that were recommended for closure and grade separation. By the way, so there's 122 crossings in the county on the county road system. We recommended 19 closures and 12 grade separations. So just to give you a sense, out of the 122, you're not going to be able to close a lot of them, nor grade separate a lot of them. But it's those 19 closures and 12 grade separations that, if fully realized, it's going to be able to generate additional safety investments at other crossings. And then we wanted to be able to tell the story better to elected officials and other general public. And so what we did is we said, let's dice up all the rail crossing or all the rail corridors in the county into individual corridors and think of them like subway lines with bus or subway stops, right? And so for each rail corridor, there was 5 in the county. We could look back in the previous 10 years and ask the question, what was the crash history there for the previous 10 years? And then we said, if we fully implemented the rail safety plan for that corridor, what would be the estimated number of crashes in the future 10 years? Then you can see those two numbers here compared with each other. So in this particular corridor, the history was 2.5 crashes And the future, if fully implemented, was 1.2 crashes, so a reduction of about 50%. So then last slide here, safety plan fruit. So it's not only did the safety plan help us think differently about rail crossing safety, but it really generated some success in terms of obtaining funding for some critical projects. So the first project here, it was funded through the RCE program. We're calling this the Midway Road Rail Crossings Elimination Planning Project. This project is actually just getting underway as we speak. It's to close 2 rail crossings, excuse me, on Midway Road, which is a primary county highway within the Duluth metro area, carries about 15 to 20% trucks, 7,000 to 9,000 vehicles a day. So a major corridor, those 2 rail crossings carry up to 30 trains per day. You can imagine the conflicts that exist because of that issue. And then, so that's the planning project. And then most recently, we were announced that we received a build grant to construct a rail crossing overpass for a small city called Aurora up on the Iron Range, about an hour north of Duluth. And that crossing that was received funding for that overpass was the #1 recommendation in the rail safety plan for a grade separation. So the 2 on Midway were the second and third recommendations for grade separation, and the 1 in Aurora was the #1 crossing recommendation. Last thought, close one, get one free. So jump off from buy one, get one free. So I presented this idea to the MnDOT Rail Office, who administers the safety funds. I said, if I close a crossing, can we use that as a way to leverage funds to install signals and gates at a crossing that would likely never receive funds? And they liked it. And they said, yeah, certainly. So we're going to be trying that going into the future of, if I close one, I can get funding to install signals and gates at another. Kind of makes me look at the number of crossing closures, the 19, as a bank account. I have 19 crossings I can spend for closures to get funding for signals and gates. So I have to spend that wisely. With that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. I have a little tagline there. If safety is proactive or not active at all. Thank you so much. Open for any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Vic. And I did drop the St. Louis County, Minnesota Railroad Crossing Safety website into the chat pod in case you're interested in learning a little bit more. We do have a couple of questions that came in for you. The first one is, have you been in touch with Operation Lifesaver organizations, specifically the one in Minnesota?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was just at a TZD workshop in May, and our new Lifesavers representative from Minnesota happened to be attending, and I got to talk about our rail crossing safety plan. And I saw his eyes getting nice and bright, and so afterwards we got to meet and greet and connect. And so we just actually had a meeting between him and I about a month ago to talk. We just brainstorm about ways that we can think about specifically rail crossing safety, because that's what they're into, is rail crossing safety. They're a great partner. And so he was really fascinated. He loved the idea of the safety plan. And so he's thinking about some ideas. We're thinking about ideas. Don't have any ideas yet, but certainly we got the connection. We got the networking. Yeah, great question.
And then another question that came in for you is, historically, how have crossings been prioritized for some treatment? Why is there not a push to treat 100% of the crossings?
Well, the question, I'm going to start on the back end. It comes down to funding. I mentioned that right now we get enough funding to install a signal and gate system, one crossing, about every 2 to 3 years. That's becoming overshadowed by the replacement of antiquated systems. So the strategy of just treating all the crossings with the funding availability that we have is not a reasonable strategy. It'll take over 100 years for us to accomplish that. But we'll never accomplish that because we have to replace the antiquated crossings. So it really comes back down to, if we can't treat 100% of our system with signals and gates, also recognizing that they're not a total TZD strategy. We're not seeing a complete elimination of crashes there. It brings into this, again, this whole point of we have to think about crossing closures and those grade separations.
Perfect. Thank you again so much for your presentation and sharing the plan that you guys have worked on. I did, again, over in the chat pod, I also dropped in the Rail Crossing Elimination program that Vic was talking about, as well as I know someone put in the Minnesota Operation Lifesaver. I dropped in the link to the national program as well, in case you're looking for your local group and would like to check out that website for the national program. Our next speaker is going to be Michael Latuski, who is a transportation specialist with the Federal Highway Administration Office of Freight Management and Operations in Washington, D.C. He works exclusively on vehicle size and weight policy and regulatory matters. Michael develops policy language for notices of proposed rulemaking, ensures VSW regulatory obligations are fulfilled, and serves as a national advisor in providing direction and guidance to FHWA divisions, states, the freight industry, and other stakeholders. And I'm excited to turn over our presentation to him to speak a little bit more about understanding safety for freight in rural communities. So Michael.
Great. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. My name is Mike Latuzik with the Office of Freight Management Operations, and as I was introduced, I specialize in commercial vehicle size and weight enforcement. The office that I represent is involved in several freight-related specialties, including truck parking, bridge and overhead strike, mitigation, freight operations, and then commercial vehicle size and weight enforcement. Oh, I'm not sharing my presentation, am I?
No, not yet. I was going to let you know that.
All right. Okay, you get it now?
No, we're still seeing your video. While Michael is pulling up his slides, a couple other things for you all. I will drop into the chat pod again the Rural Safety Center's Rural Road Safety Awareness Week website. If you go through that, you'll be able to see each day has different resources available for both road users themselves as well as for practitioners. So some of the resources we've been talking about today are listed on those daily web pages by mode. So you can check those out as well. Perfect. Your slides look great now.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Success. Leave on a high note. Technology's not my friend. Okay, as I said, my name is Mike Latuzik. I won't go through introduction again, but thank you for having me. I have to put this disclaimer in there. It's a standard federal disclaimer. You don't have to read it right now. You can read it later. It's a great bedtime material. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs we have to help mitigate vehicle crashes, driver fatigue, bridge and overhead strikes. I lost my place. Okay, some of these include the use of truck rollover warning systems. These are the implementation of some WIM equipment roadside. That's a weigh in motion equipment. It weighs a vehicle, classifies a vehicle, tells how many axles there are, how many wheels there are. I'm sorry. Okay, these systems are informed via this weigh in motion equipment. Like as I said, stationed roadside. In an instant, these weigh in motion equipment systems will convey to a dynamic messaging system, both the axle weight or the axle spacing weight, vehicle classification of the vehicle, will best determine the safe operating speed of that vehicle, send a warning to the driver to slow down, and help mitigate some rollovers. Sorry, my computer's not working with me. Thanks for your patience. We had a pilot project, the Washington Beltway in both Virginia and Maryland. During the implementation of this project, during a 3-year period post-deployment, there were no accidents reported. So the effectiveness of this was determined to be really good. It's better than most. Another mechanism being assessed for deployment is in-cab messaging systems. These are in-cab alerts that are intended to inform drivers in real time of any points of congestion, providing the drivers advanced warning needed to safely navigate any traffic crashes or traffic backups. In partnership with the Intelligent Imaging Systems and INRIX, the New Jersey DOT implemented a real-time traffic commercial vehicle traffic system, providing in-cab notifications of congestion and safety alerts, like slowdown traffic alerts. This is also deemed to be pretty effective, quite effective. All right, yep, I got it. Not, oh, this is my material, so I'm doing the best I can. If you want to talk about size and weight, I can talk all day long. So thanks for bearing with me. We also looked at some truck warning systems, additional truck warning systems, including a dynamic downhill speed warning system that utilizes weigh in motion equipment that we talked about earlier, the WIM equipment, uses to calculate for various vehicle configurations, straight trucks, 6-axle, 5-axle, the maximum safe descent speed. It's difficult to assess the vehicle weight for these descent speeds, but it's another project we're working on to link permits and link vehicle data to the actual weight of the vehicle at the time. So the suggested safe speed is then displayed on a dynamic messaging system. Those big, there's a picture right there. Those big lit up signs on the side of the road. Some are on the side, some are overhead. It displays on that DMS for that vehicle approaching that dynamic messaging system, visible to the driver, alerting them well ahead of any downhill roadway portions up ahead. Colorado implemented a measure on I-70 through their state. They realized a 13% decrease in accidents and a 24% reduction in the necessary use of truck runaway ramps. That's a really big deal. That's both for recovery and safety of the vehicle and safety of others on the road. Those runaway ramps can cause more issues. So another significant safety measure assessed and deployed by Federal Highway is a bridge and tunnel strike mitigation measure. These include overheight warning systems, early warning overhead detection systems intended to inform drivers of the safe operating height based on any structures ahead. To maximize the impact of these warning systems, Federal Highway assessed driver education programs, guidance systems, and the best way to convey this information to truck professionals. Why do trucks need to park? So truck parking has long been a concern. This is not my area of specialty, but something I work closely on. It's actually a fascinating subject, fascinating topic. It's a lot deeper than it seems. Trucks need to park, but where do they park? So most specifically, truck parking concerns are related to the availability and the spacing of parking facilities. We've all seen trucks parked at rest stops. We've all seen trucks parked at Walmart parking lots, various public parking lots, private parking lots, along the shoulder and on ramps. Each one of these poses its own concern, its own issues. These are driven by hours of operation regulations enforced by Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Drivers can only drive for so long before they have to stop for a period of time and rest or take a sleep, whatever they have to do. They cannot exceed these hours, or it's a ding on their safety record and a ding on the record of the company they represent. So having well-spaced and ample parking facilities for commercial vehicles and their drivers is critical to mitigate fatigue and the fatigue-related accidents, and of course compliance with federal regulation, which are intended to reduce the potential for crashes. Okay. A few of the more prominent truck parking challenges include utilization of undesignated parking, often along ramps and shoulders, as I mentioned before, caused in part by the limited availability of suitable truck parking facilities. Uh, in many instances, drivers find it necessary to drive beyond their allotted hours of operation to find any area for rest to get their hours in, which increases the potential for fatigue-related crashes. When you see these trucks parked on the shoulders of the road on the ramps, they're not supposed to. In most cases, they're illegal or extra legal. They pose a safety concern, a safety hazard for others on the road, as well as the vehicle itself. So having ample parking for these vehicles, these commercial vehicles, someplace more suitable for them is critical and something that we take serious and we're investigating. Some of the undesignated parking types include highway ramps. This is kind of redundant, but highway ramps, shoulders, side streets, emergency pull-offs, and public or private parking lots. Each brings its own safety concerns and logistical challenges. The highway ramps and shoulders increase the opportunities for crashes, other commercial vehicles, and private-owned vehicles. Also creates a safety hazard for vehicles on the roadway, and the use of emergency pull-offs and turnarounds. Those are on the side of the road or in between lanes and highways. You all have seen those. Sometimes commercial vehicles use those, and occupying those spaces degrades the usefulness of those facilities and oftentimes reduces emergency response times. Vehicles cannot get through or cannot get through very well or quickly. Also, the use of privately owned parking lots provides safety concerns. Jason's Law was implemented or was enacted to help develop places for truck drivers to park safely, well lit. But most of these parking lots, some of them are in abandoned malls, abandoned shopping centers, abandoned stores, wherever. Some are along little side streets, and these are all dangerous places for truck drivers to park. They can get hit by other cars, but a lot of times they're actually physically assaulted in these oftentimes not very well lit areas. Work zone management for trucks, we'll just touch on this for a little bit. So incorporating the work zone transportation management plans, these TMPs, if you're a road person, you're familiar with those, and the work zone traffic impact analysis, these are all done for work zones by state DOTs or local governments. So implementing these in the commercial vehicle operations helps to better inform, better deliver critical information to drivers regarding vehicles and operations and provide real-time information for both pre-trip and en route. So this analysis helps trucks to figure out if the lane is wide enough, if the ramps are long enough. I actually think we'll go on this in a little bit here, but it's definitely critical in informing permitting systems and truck drivers' routing to get where they need to go safely. Here we go. So some of the strategies for trucks and work zones, as I said, they present their very own unique safety concerns and in turn, specific mitigation strategies. Safe commercial motor vehicle operations requires adequate lane width for these trucks to operate, design speed for them to maneuver. You've seen the little crossovers for trucks, and it can be a challenge enough for us driving cars, let alone these trucks. The concrete barriers, the crossovers, they all pose their own issues for us and for truck drivers. And as well as congestion warning systems, letting drivers know ahead of time. You all use, some of you might use a Waze, and it tells you if there's traffic backups up ahead and maybe provides alternative routing. That's difficult enough for us. It's especially difficult for truck drivers who are restricted to routes, especially for oversized, overweight, or restricted to a turning radius. It just becomes more of a challenge for them. So maintaining truck parking facilities, adequate acceleration ramps heading onto the highway, adequate deceleration lanes coming off of the highway, these all become increasingly more critical in work zones. Harkening back to the Skagit River Bridge collapse, many of you are aware of the I-5 bridge in Washington. Oversized commercial vehicle struck a bridge just right and caused its collapse. From that, there was a bunch of implementables handed down to us from Congress. And one of those was to help better inform drivers and companies and safety professionals about bridge and tunnel strikes. And so we developed just like it's titled here, a guide for preventing and mitigating the risk of bridge and tunnel strikes by motor vehicles. So if you're looking up, there's not a cooler heading. That's just, it is what it is. But this is a result of a National Cooperative Highway Research Program effort, and CHRP, which most of you or many of you may be familiar with. We undertake lots of research under NCHRP for various projects, various issues, and this one is for bridge and tunnel strikes. So the goal was to make available to state DOTs, safety professionals, safety agencies, industry representatives, trucking companies, to better help prevent, mitigate bridge and tunnel strikes by motor vehicles, both legal dimension and oversized or overweight. Oversized and overweight usually receive, believe it or not, a little better attention because they are required to obtain special permitting. They go through a special process, so their dimensions are better regulated than most legally loaded trucks. So to accomplish this, we proposed the development of things like a national clearinghouse of bridge and tunnel data, how high bridges are, how wide tunnels are, and a data-driven approach to mitigate overhead strikes. So based on this data, how best to mitigate the bridge and tunnel strikes, as well as the assessment of commercial vehicle permitting processes, as I mentioned before, and the potential for bridge and tunnel strikes. We also propose to develop an outreach materials and processes to help better inform trucking industry, trucking operations, vehicle permitting is very important, and public safety agencies like highway patrols and state DOTs that do enforcement on the roads. This is a depiction. I won't go into it. Just it pretty much says what it's going to say. You can all read this later if you'd like. Leave some time for questions. But this is a depiction of the approach taken to help mitigate bridge and tunnel strikes. This includes identification of both crash-based and risk-based high priority locations and the process followed for mitigating those. Infrastructure countermeasures. These are the things you can, some you can see, some you can't see very well, but this is the fun part here when we get into these. So some of the most prominent infrastructure strike countermeasures for bridges and tunnels include passive systems, active systems, and sacrificial systems. We touched on some of these earlier, the dynamic messaging systems, signage, the roadside assessment of commercial vehicles, but this goes on to include advanced warning signs, flashing beacons, sometimes a flashing beacon. A lot of states use those flashing beacons if you're going too fast to run a curve. Enhanced bridge and tunnel lighting. Proper lighting is definitely a concern for tunnels, as well as some high friction pavement systems. This becomes increasingly more important on downhill stretches of road or on curves. There's a microsurfacing that takes place on the pavement. Some of the engineering folks on the call are familiar with those, which provides a little bit better traction for vehicles, but most importantly for commercial vehicles. The active systems include detection systems, roadside commercial vehicle monitoring, both by the WIM systems we talked about before, but also with other systems, and some structure monitoring systems that actually monitor the structures, the tunnels and the bridges, not so much the trucks. They'll look for strikes that are many times go unreported. The sacrificial systems, these are the fun ones. They are, just as they're labeled, they're sacrificial. They're meant to warn vehicles probably not a very nice way, that they're about to hit something worse than um, chains, signs, beams, or even bells. And these provide like a more tactile, more realistic, more real-time, audible and method of warning of the potential for overhead strikes. I'm sure some of you have seen videos of trucks hitting bridges, and before they did, they actually went under a beam and hit the beam first. Well, that beam wasn't just for fun. It wasn't something they just dinged. It was actually warning them that they're about to hit something more substantial that would cause damage to the structure and to the vehicle. In addition to the infrastructure countermeasures and driver and vehicle countermeasures, or our driver and vehicle countermeasures. So these countermeasures involve aspects such as law enforcement methods, commercial vehicle policies, how these vehicles are permitted and regulated, driver targeted liability for damages. Some of these structures are a hit, and it's difficult to get money out of the companies to repair the damage done, or the damage is done and the vehicle can't be found. It wasn't reported. Also, pilot car escort vehicles and training guides, those cars that drive ahead or behind oversized loads, warning them or verifying the overhead clearance of structures so the load can safely pass through, as well as in-cab notifications, commercial truck-based GPS policy systems, connected vehicle technologies, and load shifting monitoring. The commercial GPS policies is becoming very well analyzed. Most of the GPS systems that are in use today do not work well with commercial vehicles. If they don't tell you what a bridge weight posting is, so a lot of trucks will go over bridges that they are not supposed to go to based on their weight. Sometimes they're routed over local roads that are restricted for commercial vehicles. They're just not met for commercial vehicles. So developing the technology for truck-based GPSs for in-cab notification, real-time notification is critical, very useful. For bridge and tunnel strike preventions, something we're currently actively implementing is bridge and tunnel strike prevention industry outreach. This comprises the implementation for the guide we talked about earlier, that guide for preventing mitigated bridge strikes. And the goal of this is to develop appropriate outreach, training, education, and safety materials used in the prevention of bridge and tunnel strikes. We developed a long dynamic list of industry stakeholders, which we'll partner with to help raise awareness of and help best implement bridge and tunnel strike prevention practices, the ones that we're are developing, currently assessing. Also, we intend to provide technical assistance to state DOT bridge and safety professionals. This is on top of the industry professionals to help ensure the safe and efficient movement of oversized loads. And I made it under time with my technical glitches. So that's the end of the presentation. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I can answer most of them, and the ones I can't, I can be sure to get something back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So if anyone has any questions at this time, please go ahead and put those into the Q&A pod for any of our presenters that we've had today. Right now, Michael, we don't have any questions that have come in for you, but we did have a few people in the chat pod who are asking to be able to share this information with some freight drivers that they know. So that is fantastic. I did repost the handout one more time in the chat pod. If you haven't had a chance to download that yet, please do so. I did also put some links to the NCHRP reports that Michael was talking about over in the chat pod as well. So again, if you do have any final questions for any of our presenters, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A pod. I am going to circle back and ask some of these other questions that we didn't get to earlier. And so the first one, I believe, Vic, is for you. They're wondering how do crossing crash histories compare with your overall crash histories in your county?
Well, we have let me back up. We have 3,000 miles of county roads. Half of it's paved, half it's gravel. We typically have 5 to 8 fatal crashes per year on the county road system at large. We typically have about 1 fatality at a rail crossing once every 5 years. So it gives you kind of a sense of scale there. So obviously our biggest issues are single vehicles running off the road and angle crashes at intersections. But again, we're towards zero death county, which means rail crossing fatalities are also a priority.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our other questions that came in were for Jay. Jay, we had a question that says, it looks like the buggy lane is only on one side of CR 16, but it looks like in subsequent pictures that you have it on both sides. Have you looked at whether there have been changes to speeds on the main roadway as a result of the wider roadway footprint? And do you have a high-level plan that shows where you're looking at installing these lanes? Is it based on measure of volume or input from the Amish Safety Committee?
Yeah, it's a great comment about checking the difference in speed since after these have been installed. We haven't looked at that I know of, but that'd be a good thing to look at. Interesting question. As far as the County Road 16, maybe the picture didn't show it well enough, but there are lanes on both sides of the road, and that's we haven't tried one yet that I know of that is single-sided. I think it was just one was in process of being built, and it didn't show both sides yet for there, because we really want to avoid, just like with bicycle lanes normally, we want to avoid people going down the wrong side to try to get into shoulder if we only have one on one side. So we've tried to be symmetrical about it and have them on both sides each time. Right through there. There's another piece to that question. I think I forgot. Did they get close? Is there anything else I forgot?
Sorry, trying to get back off mute. Yes, you
Yeah.
did. You did catch those. Another question that came in for you as well is you talked about some of those alternative pavement types that could be used. Have you ever considered using some of the more flexible pavements? The respondent says they know for a while that some were trying to use porous pavements, and they believe that these tended to be on local roads, but wondered if it might be a unique application for you and perhaps even a future research project.
Yeah, it could be a good research project. No, we've not tried. We've not tried porous pavement we haven't anywhere in the county, so I'm sure we haven't for this either. It's a good thought. We do, since it is a shoulder, it does have a higher cross slope on it, so it goes to a 4% cross slope on these lanes and helps get the water off faster. I guess kind of related to the porous piece, trying to get better drainage off of that, and also helps when the horse troughs begin to form, where I guess footpath of the horses or hoof path of the horses, it's less likely to hold water because it's a higher cross slope. For that, I guess my initial thought on a porous pavement is I think they tend not to be as stiff or as resilient, maybe, and this is horses cause a lot of damage, and so I'd be a little concerned about long-term longevity to that. But it is a great research question. Thanks.
And then our final question for the day is for Michael on the freight side. The respondent is saying that you briefly mentioned this, but are there current efforts with collaborating with navigation such as Google Maps and Waze and others regarding large trucks in residential or restricted areas?
Yes, these are being looked at. The difficult part is a lot of these systems are not commercial vehicle specific. We're looking at ways to adapt the information in those to make them more useful for commercial vehicles, but this may take the development of a commercial vehicle specific routing application that can be incorporated or attached to things like Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze, just as Waze can be incorporated to some degree in Google Maps or Apple Maps. So it'll be a standalone at first that can be attached to existing systems that can help better guide commercial vehicle drivers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And as we get wrapped up, I just want to mention one more time, I did in the chat pod drop in the link for Rural Road Safety Awareness Week for this week with all the rural modes. Again, there's lots of resources on there, both for road users as well as practitioners. Some of the resources we talked about today are also listed on those pages. The podcast that I mentioned at the very beginning of today, episode 12 with Nathan Bells from University of Alaska Fairbanks, is now live on our webpage. So I did drop that link again in the chat pod as well. If you go to our website at ruralsafetycenter.org under our Home Safely podcast, you'll also find all of those episodes. So we'd love to hear you listen in on some of the uniqueness for Alaska modes and their challenges and solutions, and maybe some of those will be useful in your areas as well. So lastly, I just want to say happy Rural Road Safety Awareness Week again. Thank you all for participating in it. If you have created your own social media posts rather than just sharing ours or done a proclamation, please let us know that. We'd love to have that information. You can email us at info@ruralsafetycenter.org. And thank you one more time to our fantastic panel of speakers today. Robin, Jay, Vic, and Michael, you guys did fantastic. We've had a lot of comments about how interesting this particular webinar was, and everyone loved all the information. So thank you for being here today, and happy Rural Road Safety Awareness Week.